Welcome back. Being an African cannot be defined by race or ethnicity. This is the view of David Masondo, the head of the ANC's political school, the Tambo School of Leadership, made the assertion in an opinion piece in the Daily Maverick. Africanism was thrown into the spotlight when a Western Cape teacher got into trouble for saying he was African on a job application and not colored. Dr. David Masondo, who is also the Deputy Minister of Finance, joins me now for this conversation. Dr. Masondo, thank you. I found your writing quite thought-provoking, triggered, of course, by this case of Glenn Snyman and his insistence that he's an African in that application instead of indicating that he is colored. You make the argument there that there are two lines of thought around being an African. There are those who define being African by race and genealogical origin versus those who define being African by being Africans of the soil. Which one is prevalent in our society and which one should be prevalent?
Thanks, Thulasizwe. I think there's a tension in South Africa over those two conceptions of who's an African. And I think the case of Glenn Snyman, in which he identifies himself as an African, and when he was expected to have identified himself as a colored, it's a tension between the aspirational definition of who is an African. And this aspirational definition, it's in our constitution, it's in the Freedom Charter, and it has a long history, not only in South Africa, because when nations were being formed in Europe, that question was asked, who belongs to a nation? And the French Revolution, the 1776 US Revolution, they said everyone should be a citizen, not on the basis of ethnicity, not on the basis of race, but on the basis of their commitment to the values, to the principles of the Constitution, the political community that they were building. It's only after 1850 in the world, that's where we see now nations being defined in terms of ethnicity, and later on is race. And in our case, when a South African nation was being formed in 1910, because you remember South Africa is only formed in 1910, the colonial power asked the question, who does South Africa belong to? Who does the South African nation belong to? And their answer was, it belongs to whites and Africans, defined in terms of the pre-colonial inhabitants of Southern Africa, were not belonging to the new nation. The so-called coloreds and the Indians, largely Asians, but largely Indians, were classified as black. They did not belong to South Africa. Yeah. It's only in the Freedom Charter where South Africans, not just the ANC, 1955, they say South Africa belonged to all who live in it, black and white. So that definition of your geographical location has been an aspirational definition, and that's what we are fighting for, we're trying to build. But
how hard is it to fight for that definition of an African in that sense as an African of the soil, Dr. Masondo, in the context of the persistent continuation of racialized class inequalities that you allude to, and you're saying that this is seeing an increase in narrow African nationalism as well as white nationalism?
It is not easy. It is not easy to fight for this aspirational South Africa we're seeking to build without using the colonial classifications which were imposed on South Africans. Because for us to identify who is poor, who has been disadvantaged, unfortunately, Thulasizwe will have to use the colonial classification not to reproduce racism, but to correct what colonialism has done in the past. Because the only way to build this aspirational South Africa in which everyone, regardless of their color ethnicity, they are considered Africans. We've got to recognize that the colonial legacy is still with us, and the best way of dealing with it is to adopt measures that seek to correct what we inherited from the colonial past. And it's not easy, but there are a lot of things that we've basically done. Our constitution is there, and there are measures that we're basically undertaking: affirmative action, broad black economic empowerment. All those measures, they seek to address the imbalances of the past in order for us to build this aspirational South Africa in which everyone, regardless of color, they should be considered, and they should feel that they are Africans.
To what extent is this still prevalent, this belief and allegiance to this aspirational definition of who is an African? To what extent is it still being held earnestly within your own organization, the African National Congress? I'm pretty sure you will have heard the subtle undertones that are seeking to suggest that there's a sense in which the narrow African nationalism is sort of creeping inside the ANC and sort of the exclusion of other constituencies within the ANC. I'm pretty sure you've heard that kind of an argument.
Yes, Thulasizwe, we recruit from society. And unfortunately, in recruiting from society, you'll also recruit people who have been socialized, who have been shaped by certain reactionary, for lack of better word, ideological positions which are not consistent with the ANC. And it's for this reason that we do undertake political education in the ANC to educate ourselves about non-racialism, about the society that we seek to build, which is a South Africa in which race should not be an issue. Race should not be an issue in building a new South Africa. Yes, we should still use race to identify the inequalities of the past, but we can't be stuck in the past. Our vision is a forward-looking vision to build a new South Africa. So it's a question of how do we achieve and realize the aspiration, the definition of who's an African in the Freedom Charter as well as our Constitution.
All right, Dr. David Masondo, your thoughts have been quite interesting around this matter, but I have to ask you this now before I let you go. Why does Ranjani Munusamy work for National Treasury? Why is she the community outreach officer in the ministry where you work? What has your boss told you, Ditomboweni?
No, as the minister in the statement indicated that it is his prerogative to determine who he employs based on their capabilities.
Are capabilities the only consideration? Now, from your understanding, not asking you to defend the position of the minister and the ministry, I'm asking you as someone who is a senior leader in the ANC and also in the SACP, is capability enough? Is that the only consideration?
No, Thulasizwe, we're not going to do an interview on who qualifies, who doesn't qualify for a job, because I think it will be unfair even for Ranjani herself to be making judgments on her capabilities and other criteria that she have insofar as this job is concerned.
Okay.
And I also suggest that perhaps you can also take it further with the minister.
Right. I'm asking you because you are a senior leader, and I've never known you to be a fence sitter. So that's why I'm putting you on the spot. And I did say beforehand, we had invited you for one interview, and I did say up front before we went on air that I have a duty to ask you some of these questions because I do believe you're a senior leader in our society and within the ANC. What message does it communicate to broader South African society in light of the stated message and intention of your administration, the Cyril Ramaphosa administration, to do things differently in the fight against corruption? When you have someone who has serious allegations, this is not a trifle, as I said a bit earlier on. The allegations from Crime Intelligence Secret Service Fund are pretty serious. When she is in that position without her name having been cleared through the proper channels, what message does it communicate?
No, Thulasizwe, like I said before we started the interview, that conversation, we can have it at another time, and not that we are hiding anything, but I do not want us to set a precedent in which we get on a national platform like this one and discuss job processes
Sure.
of particular individuals. Because precisely tomorrow, I'll have to be asked about another individual. So I think once we get into that trajectory, we are setting a very dangerous precedent.
Fair enough. Do you believe that your ministry owes South Africans, not Thulasizwe Simelane, not ENCA, an explanation in the circumstances beyond the terse statement that was released by Mashudu yesterday? Do you believe we need to know more than that? Surely that's not controversial, Deputy Minister.
No, indeed, Thulasizwe, we'll answer those questions, not in abstract, because we need to be clear what exactly are the concerns, and we need to treat everyone equally. We don't necessarily have to focus on a particular individual. So like I said, I think that conversation, we can have it at another time. Because today, I came on your platform to talk about who's an African and how should we build a non-racial South Africa.
All right, I really appreciate your time, Dr. David Masondo of the ANC School of the Political Education head there, talking to me about her article about who is an African and also fielding a few of my questions around the issue of Ranjeni Munosamba.